Hey friends, welcome back to more Reddit stories about entitled people, crazy people, and everything in between. Hope you're all doing awesome. Be sure to subscribe for more, and as usual, let's get right into today's Reddit posts. A tale of chaos, woe, and calling mom. This happened a few years ago when I was working hotel security at a resort in Southwest Florida. I get called for a drunk guy in the valet area. Apparently, he's yelling, screaming, and harassing the valets. So I get down to the valet area, and one of the valets points the guy out to me, and I go over and say, "Sir, come here, let's talk." The guy takes one look at me and says, "Oh sh*," and runs off. Now, I'm a bigger guy, so I don't chase after people. Fortunately, drunk people are easy to track. They leave a trail. I'm following his trail of destruction. Overturned trash cans, bushes he pushed aside as he was running away, guests telling me he went that way. And finally, the houseman, former Haitian National Police, calling me over the radio saying he had the drunk guy cornered on the second floor of one of the buildings. And sure enough, when I get there, the houseman has the guy cornered. So we both take the guy by the shirt and we're going to my office. I see he has a resort wristband, so we're going to figure out who he belongs to. We take the elevator to the ground floor, and this guy uses all his drunk strength to wriggle free and runs off into the darkness of the beach. At this point, I've had enough. I saw the front desk manager and have her call the police. She wants to argue with me over why the police need to be called over one drunk guy. Meanwhile, the houseman went one way to find the drunk guy and I went another. So as I'm headed to the beach, the manager finally agrees to call the police. I get out to the beach and I quickly find the houseman wrestling with the drunk guy. At this time, the maintenance guy, who is a retired police officer, joins in on the fun. So we're all wrestling this guy, trying not to hurt him. The manager is on the phone with dispatch, giving basic information. The manager is relaying all the questions dispatch has, one of which was, is he white, black, Hispanic, or Asian? I am getting frustrated with the whole situation, so I just yell into the radio, "He's drunk." Not my finest moment. So the dispatcher, through the manager, says, "That's not an answer." So I answer that he is white, and I also mention that we are trying to detain him. Turns out dispatch would prefer that we did not do that, so she tells us to let him go, which we do immediately. The drunk guy runs off. We follow him. Maintenance gets ahead of us, and then starts laughing at the guy as he's trying to climb the fence into the pool area and keeps falling down. It was at this moment that the sheriff's department deputies round the corner. So they see the maintenance guy laughing his ass off and they think he's the guy we're talking about, so they tell him to get on the ground. I point out that the person they're after is the guy that's trying to go over the fence. The drunk guy sees the sheriff's deputies and immediately goes into the grassy bushy area between the resort and the beach and wraps himself around a particularly big bush. During the previous struggle, the houseman had gotten the wristband off the drunk guy, so I told the sheriff's deputies that while they were dealing with this guy, I was going to run the wristband and see who he belonged to, and try to bring them out to talk to him. They agreed, and fast forward through the whole 15 minutes it took to get the guy's name and the room number and all that. I find that the guy is here with a wedding party and he's staying in a room with his cousin. So I bring the guy's cousin out to him, and by then a couple more sheriff's deputies had arrived as well as an ambulance. The cousin is talking to him for a few minutes before the deputies get irritated and have other things to do. So the deputies drag the guy out, and that guy held onto the bush really tight. The deputies almost dragged the bush out with the guy, but they eventually got the guy loose and put him on the stretcher. The EMTs strapped him down. So now the guy is screaming to nobody in particular, "They're taking me, they're taking me." And then to his cousin, call mom, and he repeated those over and over. Eventually they stuffed him in the ambulance and drove off. Thus ends the tale of the drunk guy. And someone in the comments asked, why detain him? And do hotel security guards have the legal right to detain someone like this? Unless the story is missing something, the guy was drunk and caused a nuisance at the valet area, but then stopped and wanted to leave. He didn't commit any crimes unless he actually assaulted a valet, and he was trying to leave and go about his business, drunk or otherwise. Why chase him, tackle him, wrestle him, and try to detain him? NOP elaborates, saying, technically yes, on private property. And we were attempting to detain him to prevent him from tripping and falling into one of the several pools or hot tubs, or running into the street and getting killed by a car. And there is no evidence he was trying to leave. When he ran away from me, he ran further into the property. And another person says, weird to read Americans call cops on drunks. In the UK, they're the last person we call. It's usually a taxi. But honestly, the way it was handled makes sense to me. I don't really get why people are trying to defend this drunk guy. Do you actually think he would get in a taxi if they called one? It was obvious security was called because he was initially causing some kind of ruckus with the valets, and upon seeing the security guy, he decides to run further into the property, trying to climb fences and behaving like a crazy wild animal. Of course they're going to do something about that on private resort property. Boomer neighbors with otherworldly entitlement nearly sets fire to my tree. Man oh man, yesterday was a trip, but I'm happy my retired and entitled neighbor is finally facing some consequences for his actions. He has been a pain in my side for a solid year now. It started with his actively collecting fallen sticks, twigs, and branches, then casually tossing them in my yard, enough so it was an obvious unnatural pattern. I adjusted my security cameras to watch that end of my yard. Sure enough, he has just been tossing sticks in my yard, so I just tossed them back and never said a word. After a couple weeks, he finally noticed my camera. From there, it just escalated. One day, he grabbed my camera and buried it under a log pile. I remounted it up high. Then he spends every day going outside to just flip me the middle finger, swear consistently. Then he starts wandering my property. I have him trespassed. Then he acted like I took something from him that was rightfully his, all summer last year. He's obsessed about the property line. Obsessively stands at the property line staring into my front and backyard. He's done some night prowling around trying to get on my property, but kept setting my cameras off. Then he would back off. Oh yeah, he spent time to find all my cameras. Dog crap started to appear in my backyard. I move a camera to monitor. It stops the next day. What a coincidence. Lots of obsessive, disturbing behavior. All this time I call the police whenever he does some really vexatious things, or for trespassing again. Eventually winter comes and I get a reprieve. It's too cold for him. Then some winter storms hit. Large branches fall along the property line. He rolls them in my yard. Some clear trespassing, but just barely on my yard. Winter ends and I go to get my property survey. He calls the cops on the surveyor. After the cops show, the surveyor gets to finish the job, placing survey stakes down along the line. He rips them out and tosses them in my yard. I call the cops. They're replaced. He refuses to talk to police. Police leave. He then steals the survey stakes, but the cops determined it wasn't necessary to return that night. Okay, fine. This guy returns the stakes much later that night. I can go on and on. Fast forward to yesterday. Long story short, I put a note on a tree telling him to exercise caution when digging holes for his arborvitae right near a 50-foot oak. He could very well kill the tree. He is still insistent on digging near my towering oak tree. He's going to end up killing it. He plans on digging 3 to 4 more times within 10 feet of the trunk. He's going to cut some major roots and he might even cause the tree to fall then and there. It's leaning. I guess I'll deal with that when it happens. He posts a sign telling me to stop harassing him. I shouldn't have, but I left another note saying calling the cops for his actions is not harassment. That is when he decided to torch it, got it on camera. I call 911 when I get home. They come. He is drunk as a skunk. He can't even maintain a consistent train of thought mid-sentence. Eventually the cops use clever wordplay to get him to admit to torching my sign on a tree, which there is clearly burned paper and scorch marks on the bark. This guy believes after all of this, he has done nothing wrong. Like his logic is absolutely absurd. It's some straight-up sovereign citizen type mentality finally hearing him talk. Like because the street is public property, that gives him absolute rights to walk off the street wherever he desires, giving him access to walk into my yard. He's pissed I haven't cut my trees in 30 years. I've only lived here for 3 years, and last year I did some trimming. Eventually he got indignant with the cops, literally saying in a posh English tone, "You have insulted me on my property. I am done with you. Good day, sir." Then storms off into his house. He slams the door in a cop's face as the cops follow him. Cop opens the door. He explodes. "How dare you open my door? You're trespassing, breaking and entering," and so on. I thought he was going to get arrested. It got bad. So the cops assured me he is going to face charges for this. There is evidence of attempted arson. Am I the a-hole for throwing my rings in the ocean after my husband told me he had an affair, even though it was a prank? This is the dumbest thing that's ever happened to me in my entire life. This past Sunday, my husband and I, male 29 and female 27, were on our boat together. We were just relaxing and talking and having a good morning. All of a sudden, my husband gets really serious and tells me, "Baby, I'm so sorry, but I have to tell you something. I'm so sorry, please forgive me. I had an affair." For context, my husband thinks he's a comedian. He says dumb crap all the time, but he's never joked about our marriage or relationship or cheating, ever. The way he said it, I fully believed him. I was blinded by rage and hurt, and I'm not a confrontational person at all, so all I did was stand up, take my rings off, and throw them into the ocean. I don't even know why I did it. It was just the first thing I thought of doing. My husband's jaw hit the floor. He immediately started to yell at me that it was a joke, a prank. He wasn't serious, and I was an idiot. My jaw dropped then, too. I yelled at him too and called him the same. I cried too, realizing I just threw my lovely and sentimental rings into the ocean. We've been arguing for days. He says I'm the a-hole, I say he's the a-hole, and I have no idea who's right. Yes, admittedly, I threw about 10K worth of rings into the ocean, and we will never find them again. But he looked me in the eyes and told me he had an affair. I am upset about my rings. I've apologized for throwing them, but I just don't feel like the a-hole. And this comment here puts it pretty well. If someone lies to you about your child being killed in a car accident, then tells you later that it's just a joke, that doesn't change the traumatic experience you just had of believing your child is dead. Making someone experience trauma isn't a prank, it's engaging in cruelty for your own amusement. And this other person says, right, it's like yelling fire in a crowded theater and then claiming the right to free speech. Husband isn't a comedian, he's a f***ing asshole. And I would also have to agree. While throwing your rings in the ocean is certainly a very impulsive and regrettable decision, I still wouldn't say that OP should have the spotlight on them as being the bad guy here. It's her husband that instigated the whole situation in the first place. So yeah, it was a big expensive oopsie, but OP absolutely has a right to be mad. Her husband should be apologetic. Anyway friends, thank you for watching, I appreciate it. Make sure to drop a like if you enjoyed and subscribe to the channel for more Reddit shenanigans. So stay awesome, have a nice day, and I'll see you next time.